Trigger warning. Eating disorders and body image issues and concerns are discussed in this podcast episode 195. Some people may find this triggering. If this causes you any distress, please seek support and contact Butterfly Foundation National Helpline for free and confidential support on 1-800-33-4673. Available from 8 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week, Australian Eastern Standard Time. Or in a crisis, please contact your nearest hospital, emergency services, doctor, or mental health professional. Hi everyone, it's Yvette Leblowitz from spiritgirl.com and welcome to Feel Good From Within. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Dana Sturtevant. And then we're here with also Hilary Kinavey. They're both the founders of Body Trust. Hilary is a licensed therapist and Dana is a registered dietitian. And we're going to be talking to them both today about their brand new book, Reclaiming Body Trust, Path to Healing and Liberation, and how we can break free from the status quo and reject a diet culture that has taken advantage and profited from trauma, stigma, and disembodiment, and fully reclaim and embrace our own bodies. Dana and Hilary, welcome to the show. How are you both today?
Very good. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
And I want to welcome our global audience. Super grateful you're here with us today, Dana and Hilary. We're going to be finding out how we can truly embrace our own body, reclaim it, and feel that we are truly enough. So before we dive into your book, Dana, would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
I'm a registered dietitian, as you said, and as somebody who grew up in the culture as a woman, had a certain impact on my relationship with my body and food. And there was a somewhat protective effect in my household because while my mom, I'm sure at times struggled with her body, it wasn't something she did outwardly. It wasn't something I heard. And she didn't have an overt focus on my body or perfecting my eating habits. So I struggled certainly growing up, but never kind of went hugely down the rabbit hole that is dieting and disordered eating. And then, of course, as a dietitian, I trained in the dominant weight paradigm to think that I was focusing on healthy lifestyle behaviors, not encouraging people to diet. Most healthcare providers know that dieting doesn't work. What they don't realize is there's so many things that we still are doing that collude with a dieting mindset. So much of what I was promoting in hindsight were dieting behaviors, but we were calling it healthy lifestyle. And after working in quote unquote weight management, I started to feel unethical and was pretty disillusioned with what we were doing. And I really felt like focusing on people's weight was not helpful. And I was starting to see that it was probably harmful. And I really felt like we could trust people's bodies to sort out the weight. And around that time, I discovered Health at Every Size, which is a growing community of people that are concerned about this war on people's weight and how that impacts people. And then I discovered intuitive eating, and there the authors talked about this dieting mindset. And it really was where I realized that I couldn't really do what I was doing anymore. And I didn't necessarily know where I was headed, that I'd be talking to you on a podcast with a book out. But I knew I wanted to partner with a therapist. I wanted to offer something radically different, that nobody was going to hire me to do it, that it was something I would have to do myself. That's how I met Hilary, as we both had our private practices in the same space. And we started facilitating conversations with people about their bodies and their well-being. And that's where Body Trust was really born.
Hilary, are you happy to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
As you said, I'm a professional counselor. I'm a therapist. I came to this work with my own kind of disrupted and disordered relationship with my body. And as I got help for it, it was around the time I was also finishing my training to become a therapist. And I was really, really troubled that there wasn't a good and affirming conversation happening about bodies and size in my counseling program, and that we barely discussed eating disorders at all in my training. And that's pretty normative for counseling training, at least in the United States still. And it's still that therapists, just like other healthcare professionals, are having very troubling conversations with people that really uphold diet culture and body shame. As I went on in my work, it became really important to me that both clinicians get better training and that people of all sizes get to have conversations that are about dismantling troubled, disrupted, disordered relationships with food in their bodies and move towards something that's far more in alignment with having an enjoyable and vital life. And that we don't do that well when we're dieting, and we don't do that well with disordered eating, and we don't do that well when we're trying to acquiesce to the mainstream. So much of the shame that persists within us is about trying to meet the standards of the dominant culture, and it's very dehumanizing.
And in your work through Body Trust, we sit here today and it's 2022 and it's the same marketing from many decades ago in Australia. Blonde hair, blue eyes, six-pack, fit, size 8, 21-year-old girl, and sex sells. Still the same marketing image today. And whilst we're slowly breaking in, where we have a little bit of a more diverse gender base and ethnicity, we still have so far to go where every body of every shape, size, color, race, gender is included in all brands' marketing and in media and across the board. Obviously, reading your book, you have started to see a shift, but do you feel we still have some way to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think as in with most movements for social justice, it's very grassroots and it's happening among the people. And for those who stand up for radical body inclusion and body positivity are the ones who are making the change. The money makers are just finding ways to co-opt the body positive movement and turn it into more ways to make money. And the money is made by people making choices from disembodiment, having that expertise have to be external to them. People have always lived in a variety of sizes of bodies, and they always will. And so to assume that bodies are supposed to all match a certain aesthetic is kind of missing out on what's truly amazing about being human, which is that we aren't all the same and that we cannot be all the same. And bestowing privilege upon people that do meet the beauty standard is temporary and fleeting. There's nothing in that for anyone. It's just marketing and money making, just like you're saying.
What are your thoughts on that, Dana?
A huge part of what we do with people is help them understand how they lost trust with their bodies. We believe body trust is a birthright, that we're not born into this world feeling this way, but we're socialized into all of these constructs. And the socialization starts so early that we don't even think to question what we've been taught to believe. A huge part of our work is helping people see beauty as a social construct. And with the advent of social media, more people get voices on social media. And we've seen movement in fat acceptance, body positivity. We've seen some strides there. We see more body diversity. We see more women, people assigned female at birth, divesting from diet culture and saying, I'm done. Diet culture repackages itself and shape shifts to sell you the same stuff, but call it Noom or whatever it is today. We have to include the wellness industry now because health has become an aesthetic and we think we can look at somebody and know. And most of the people who are probably pursuing these six-pack abs think they're doing it under the guise of health. That's such bullshit. If we really get deep down, having a six-pack has nothing to do with your health. It doesn't make you healthier than somebody who does not have a six-pack. But there's this obsession with being lean. And especially for men and people assigned male at birth, there can be more of an obsession with being lean and having six-pack abs than being thin and having a thigh gap, for instance. But men are seen as an untapped market by the industry because so much over the years, it's been so centered around women and women's bodies that because women are choosing to divest, they need to go after other people to keep making their money. And we're seeing boys at younger and younger ages getting preoccupied now. And because there's this belief that you have to weigh a certain amount to be healthy, people just collude them all together and associate them with one another. And it's really misguided. Part of our work is helping people see that, see through all of that, recognize the atmosphere in which they're living, that we can begin to push back and divest from that.
And I can speak from experience as a once personal trainer and instructor who started out of high school teaching when cassettes were in the fitness industry. I was so body image self-obsessed that I can tell you both here today and our listeners, I did have a six-pack, but I still stood in front of the mirror thinking I was fat. I trained excessively, I ate little, and my mental health was the worst it had ever been. So up on stage, you could see me fit, doing all these things, and you'd probably want to aspire to be like me. And definitely now I can say I don't have a six-pack. I carry a bit of extra, as they would say, weight. And I meditate, I do yoga, I walk, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. So for anyone listening in, if you think happiness comes from having a six-pack, I can tell you in my experience, it didn't bring happiness. I want to ask you now about your book. What inspired you to write Reclaiming Body Trust, A Path to Healing and Liberation? And what is the meaning behind the book title?
Dana and I have worked together for 17 years as an individual practice and training clinicians to do better. We finally felt like we were in the place to write this book about all that we had learned from sitting with and talking with people for the last 17 years. Like you just shared about your own lived experience, there's a lot of stories that don't get told. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to health and wellness and the way we think about our bodies and what actually makes us happy. We wanted that to happen. We also wanted to make sure that we were telling stories from the perspective of living in fat bodies. We only talk about fatness as a negative, and we only talk about fatness through the lens of what somebody should do about it. Instead of acknowledging that people every day are living glorious lives in fat bodies and have to often contend and sometimes heal from the effect of living in a culture that is so fat phobic and horrible to fat people. That's a lot of what our work has been about. What this book is about, when we're talking about reclaiming body trust, we're talking about people being able to get back in connection and live with their bodies with a sense of trust and appreciation in their own self-knowledge and their own body's knowledge. But we're also acknowledging that the culture has taken body trust from people, that body trust has been ruptured because of our over-reliance on external information for health and wellness. And we want folks to turn towards their own healing and to divest from diet culture in order to experience more joy and also more liberation.
Love that. For both of you now, Dana and Hilary, how does it feel to have your book out in the world and to be able to share these incredible stories of transformation and liberation and people reclaiming their body trust?
It's an amazing feeling. It's still a little surreal. It certainly feels more real when you hold it in your hands. Finally. It's been 17 years in the making, really. We always thought we would write a book, but we didn't know when. I said the book we would have written 5 years ago would be very different than the book we wrote that just came out. And it's really nice to have our work in a form that people can hold in their hands and read, and to have it be that accessible. It's incredibly nuanced work, and I think even our friends and family don't fully understand what we do. And it's really kind of cool to be able to say, hey, if you want to know what I do, here you go. And I think people are learning a lot about us and our work. And I think even the people who followed us for a long time and worked with us are finding it incredibly useful to have it in this way.
I listened to your book actually on Audible whilst I was driving on the highway in Australia, and I loved listening to all of the stories, the very personal stories, and it was incredible to hear people open up and give you access to sharing that so we could learn more as the listener or the reader. There was one thing that stood out. You touched on this BMI that's used everywhere. When we go to the doctor's surgery, if we're a little bit overweight, we get told we got to fit into this BMI. The doctor tells us we got to lose weight, we got to get healthy. And everywhere we turn on social media, we're always being told if we're overweight, we're basically shamed that we got to lose weight, because if we're overweight, we're not healthy. Can you share more about the BMI and what you've discovered about that?
The BMI is like the card that's holding up the whole house of cards, and the whole house of cards is utter bullshit that's just been built on and built on. The BMI was never created to have anything to do with health, to measure health, to speak to health. It was created in the 19th century by a mathematician who wanted to show the distribution of a population of people. It turned out like a bell curve, like most human characteristics do. And that's what it was for. And it was adopted by insurance companies and then adopted by the medical system as a quick measurement that they don't have to work very hard for. And then we started applying it to health. And it really speaks to health not at all. The other thing that's really important for people to know about the BMI is that it has racist origins. The person who developed the BMI definitely was doing some of his learning in circles who practice eugenics. There was this idea of creating the ideal person or the most ideal genetics scenario. We're talking about white people, we're talking about men, we're talking about lean people, and all these ideas that we know now contribute to great violence in the world. The BMI is not useful, except for that it's lazy and easy medicine. And so that's how its utility has been used. And it's relatively easy for medical providers to do quickly. It's not a vital sign by any means. It measures nothing. And just because someone is at one end of the BMI or the other doesn't really speak to their health. It's why we also ourselves don't use the words overweight or obese in our work. And the reason why is that these words we find pathologize people, and they're rooted in the BMI, which is bunk and isn't helpful. We shy away from that and tend to use the words fat, as you've probably heard us do already today, and also use words like someone who lives at the smaller end of the weight spectrum or the larger end of the weight spectrum. But the fat acceptance movement and fat folks in general, if they're on a liberatory path, introduced to a liberatory path, tend to prefer fat as a neutral descriptor, is a word that's been weaponized against people inappropriately. And we think of it more as a neutral descriptor, kind of like short or tall.
And are you finding, in terms of social media, I have seen where people, as you would say, fat, but then they get shamed for promoting obesity.
There is an idea that if people online are in fat bodies and showing their enjoyable fat lives or spreading fat joy, that somehow they're promoting obesity by being themselves and experiencing their lives, which is the most utterly bullshit proposition I've ever heard. And it's about control, and it's about dominance, and it's abusive. It's completely inappropriate concept.
And you shared a lot of stories in your book. What is one story, if you could share today to our listeners, that really comes to mind?
I mean, I think of the story that opens, the story of swimming and what called this person back to the sea, and how her body told her, I want to move. And she heard it and she knew what to do. And this is a person who had a really kind of compulsive relationship with swimming when she swam in a pool at the gym and did laps. The story talks about how when she swims in the sea, she can't count laps. She swims until she feels done. And she also knows when the sea is saying it's not a good day to come in here. We say body trust is a homecoming. And I think body trust is sometimes about seeing our wild nature and the ways that we were born and how we get tamed over the years. And being in nature is an opportunity for many of us to connect with something larger than ourselves and to see our connection to all things. And that beauty comes in all sizes and shapes. And so I think that story kind of beautifully highlights so much of that.
And if someone's listening in and they're feeling really terrible with their body, they don't feel like they fit in, how could they start the process of body trust? I would firstly say read your book or listen to it. That would be the first step.
I have to agree that the book is a good start.
That's good to hear.
I mean, we could write it for folks who are kind of new to all of this and want to know and want to be introduced. We do find a lot of people come to this work feeling like, gosh, I'm not sure I want to do this, but I also don't want to go back. Feels awful and I don't want to continue, but I don't necessarily know how to go forward. And so a lot of people start there, and a lot of people start by engaging in a really heady exploration of the podcasts and the books and the things out there. And we see that as a very important place to start. Like, this is a very different paradigm. It changes your life and you want to know about it first. So do that. And then we want somebody to really spend some time with their body story and try to find the stuff that never should have belonged to them in the first place. The ideas about what's attractive, the ways their body has been hurt along the way, the dieting practices they were introduced to at a young age before it was even developmentally appropriate to engage in them, the conditional kinds of encouragement that said, if you do this, you will be more loved or you will be more liked. Rooting some of that out can be a really important place to start too. And that's a lot of what body trust practice is about, is beginning to take ownership of your body story. It's also about a reckoning with eating and all those things, but the body story is a big part of it and often a place where people start too.
And we have a Bad Body Day. We call it a Bad Body Day toolkit, but there's some of that in one of the later chapters of the book, which I think is something you're talking about. What do we do when we're having a bad body day? And somebody with a strong body trust practice is not necessarily immune to having bad body days, but they have an analysis and the skills and tools to navigate those days without being disruptive to themselves. Something I would share with listeners today is when you're having a bad body day, get curious, because probably yesterday it wasn't a bad body day, but today it is. Or 3 hours ago you were fine, but all of a sudden now you're feeling horrible about yourself and your body. And that often causes us to zoom in on the body and start to hyper scrutinize the body. I would recommend that you reduce body checking behaviors and just notice the ways you check your body by scrutinizing, looking in the mirror, squeezing, feeling, and to widen your lens and ask yourself what else might be going on. Because bodies don't change in 24-hour periods, but how we feel about our bodies changes. And so knowing that can sometimes reduce how hooked we get on these days.
And when someone's looking at social media, would you say it's very, very important that they curate their feeds?
Yeah, some of our clients create a separate account, second account that they use on particularly bad days where they know if they go to that feed, it's only going to be stuff that reinforces this. And other people just notice who the people in their lives, in their feeds, kind of trigger those bad body moments, those bad body days, or thoughts about dieting or disordered eating, and they unfollow them or they unfriend them or they mute them for 30 days or snooze them for 60 days and kind of reduce their exposure. When you start to wake up to the insidious nature of diet culture, you begin to see it everywhere. And you often begin to see it in people in your life. And there may be some folks you need to have some boundaries with, especially in social media. They won't know you snoozed them. You're protecting yourself from seeing things that can be pretty triggering and toxic for you. Some people do a combination of both of those things. If you want to check out the accounts we follow on our social media Center for Trust, you can go to see who we follow and also start to follow work we share, because that'll be a great way to curate your own social media.
I love those tips. All of my life, I've only ever heard of, if you're fat, you need to lose weight. If you're fat, you're unhealthy. And the shaming, that's got to be detrimental to our mental health. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to mental health?
I think it's been really detrimental to mental health. I think fat phobia contributes to eating disorders. It contributes to depression and anxiety. It creates PTSD in some people, especially for folks that have endured it in an ongoing way or when they were young in their families. It's really, really harmful. And it's not because we name fatness as the problem. In so many places in our culture, we see abusing fat people in kind of negative motivation, like it's going to create change or that people are going to lose weight somehow because they feel bad about their bodies. And that's the kind of stuff that either starts eating disorders or creates a lifetime of not being able to live in the bodies they have. It's incredibly abusive. We have an incredibly abusive relationship that we get away with as a culture around the concept of fatness, and people are suffering, and they don't have to. If we didn't have fat phobia, I would have had a different career. But my entire 20 plus year career as a therapist has been devoted to helping people reckon and heal and find ways to live in a culture that's so disrespectful to them.
It now is up to each and every one of us to treat people with pure kindness and let them be themselves as they are. Hilary, Dana, how do you take care of yourself? What are some of your own self-care rituals, Hilary?
Right now, it's allowing myself to rest, lowering expectations, practicing self-trust, and making sure joy is at the center of my decision-making.
I love that. Making sure joy is at the center of my decision making. And Dana?
Being close to water, hiking near water, being in water, always water, being close to the ocean. If I can go to a hike, or our local Japanese garden is kind of my sanctuary pretty regularly, especially since the pandemic. So water is a huge one for me. Listening to music, dancing, live music. I went to a show last night. It was great. So those are two big ones for me.
I love that. Water, dancing, music. You both really focus on joyous activities and joy in your life versus jumping on boxes. Hilary, you and I talked about this before. If you tell me to jump on a box and that's the current social trend, I'm not fitting in. I have a saying, don't fit in, fit out.
Yes, no box jumping, ridiculous.
Before we say goodbye, what is your hope for your newfound book readers or Audible audio listeners?
I mean, I hope they know that they can come home, that it is possible to cultivate a different relationship with food in your bodies, that you're not broken, that this isn't your fault, and that there's a different way.
I mean, I hope they know they're not alone, that for as many naysayers they may have in their life, there is as robust a community of people pulling for them and supporting their liberation.
All are welcome here, and this was made with you in mind.
Now, how can we stay in touch with you after this podcast show?
You can find us at centerforbodytrust.com and Center for Body Trust on Instagram. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. We hang out on Instagram the most. And so we hope you'll give us a follow or check out the site and let your curiosity guide you.
Thank you, Dana and Hilary. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful I discovered your book. Your work's incredible. Your dedication to helping others reclaim their body trust. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening in and being part of the show. Feel Good From Within with Yvette Blowitz, Spirit Girl Podcast. I hope you found this conversation of interest and benefit to you. In support, I would love for you to subscribe to Feel Good From Within with Yvette Blowitz, Spirit Girl Podcast on any podcast app you listen to the show through, or on YouTube too. And to also leave a review of what you think too on any podcast app you listen to the show through. And be sure to share this show with your family, friends, and community, and to subscribe to my mailing list at spiritgirl.com, yvetteblowitz.com, or feelgoodfromwithin.com, and to follow Spirit Girl or Yvette Blowitz on any social media app. And together, let's feel good from within.